The vegetables that taste best are not the ones that got the most sun. That is not a theory. It is a documented growing condition. Partial shade slows the process that makes spinach bitter, turns kale aggressive, and bolts your lettuce into something inedible in 3 weeks. The shadiest corner of your yard is not the problem corner. For 20 vegetables, it is the ideal one. I found this out the hard way. 3 summers of failed lettuce in the south-facing bed before I moved a row into the strip beside the north fence out of frustration. That row was still producing in August. The south-facing bed had been a stalk factory since June. Nobody told me. Nobody put it on the seed packet. And when I started looking into why, the history, the botany, the 2,000 years of gardeners who already knew this, I found out that the shaded corner had been feeding people longer than the sunny one had. 20 vegetables. Every one of them grows in the corner you stopped looking at. Number 18 has been harvested from shaded Japanese temple courtyards since the 16th century and produces more leaves in partial shade than it ever does in full sun. Number 11 is the herb Roman legionaries carried across northern Europe, specifically because it bolts in sun and thrives in shadow. And number 1 is a true perennial, not an annual, not a biennial, that has grown in the same dark cottage garden corners in Wales since before the Enclosure Acts, coming back every February without being asked for decades. Subscribe before we start. Number 20, landcress, Barbaria verna. Most gardeners have never heard of it. Every Victorian kitchen garden grew it. Landcress is the poor man's watercress. Same peppery bite, same dark glossy leaves, none of the requirement for running water. A fixture in working-class cottage gardens across Britain and Ireland from the 18th century, grown specifically in the shadiest corner because that was the corner that stayed cool and moist through summer. The RHS was recommending it for shaded beds by the 1880s. Then the supermarket made watercress cheap and landcress quietly vanished. It is coming back. In shade, it does something most salad greens cannot. It stays in leaf from October through April, through frost, through sleet, through the months when your garden is otherwise a mudscape. Sow it in August in the darkest corner you have. By November, it is the only thing growing. By February, it is the best thing on your plate. I grew a rao along the north fence 3 winters ago, the strip where the light disappears by 9 in the morning. I harvested it with scissors in January, while the rest of the garden was frozen solid, dark, glossy leaves, sharp enough to wake up any winter salad. Think of it as the vegetable that works the night shift while everything else is sleeping. The most useful corners in a garden are usually the ones we stopped looking at. Number 19, Minutina Plantago coronopus. The Medici served this at Renaissance banquets in Florence. Then it disappeared for 400 years. Minutina, also called erbastella, or buck's horn plantain, was a prized salad ingredient in Italian Renaissance cooking from the 15th century onward. The Florentine herbalist Pietro Andrea Mattioli documented it in his Discorsi of 1544 as a vegetable of considerable distinction. It vanished when French salad fashions overtook Italian ones in the 17th century and simply never came back. Seed Savers Exchange reintroduced it to North American gardeners in the 1990s. It is still almost unknown. The leaves are long, narrow, and toothed, like a green asterisk, tender, slightly succulent, mild and grassy with a faint maritime edge. In full sun, it bolts within weeks. In partial shade, it stays productive for months, sending up new leaves faster than you can harvest them. It asks for nothing except a cool, dark corner and someone willing to look for it in the seed catalog. Think of it as a Renaissance table ingredient waiting to be rediscovered in the corner your garden forgot about. The most interesting vegetables are usually the ones somebody stopped growing for reasons that had nothing to do with quality. Number 18, Mitsuba, Cryptotaenia japonica. Japanese temple gardeners were harvesting this from shaded courtyards in the 16th century. Most Western gardeners have never grown it. That gap is the whole story. Mitsuba, Japanese parsley, has been a fixture of Japanese cuisine for over 1,000 years. The earliest records of its cultivation appear in the Engishiki, a Japanese administrative document compiled in 927, listing it among the plants in the imperial kitchen gardens. Shade is not a constraint for Mitsuba. It is the preferred condition. The leaves are trifoliate, 3 leaflets on a long pale stem, with a flavor between flat leaf parsley, celery, and angelica. In full sun, it bolts and turns bitter. In partial shade, it stays productive for months. In full shade, it grows more slowly, but remains harvestable into autumn. I grew my first pot on a shaded balcony in 2021, mostly out of curiosity. By August, it had outproduced every herb I had grown in full sun that year. I have not been without it since. Think of it as the herb 1,000 years of Japanese kitchen gardens already knew, and the West simply never bothered to ask about. The best vegetables in a shaded garden are usually the ones that were never designed for the sun in the first place. Number 17, Claytonia, Montia perfoliata. This plant kept gold rush miners alive through the California winters of 1849 and 1850. They called it miner's lettuce because it was the only green thing growing in the shade of the canyon walls when everything else had died. Claytonia perfoliata was documented by the Spanish botanist José Longinos Martinez in 1792, growing in the shaded understory of oak woodland along California's central coast. The Ohlone and Pomo peoples had been eating it for centuries before that. Leaves, stems, and flowers all edible, mild and succulent. The miners had almost no access to fresh vegetables. Miners' lettuce grew wild in the shaded canyon bottoms, required no cultivation, and kept them from scurvy. A plant that grows in the darkest corner of your yard was once a survival food. In cultivation, it is almost absurdly easy. Sow in autumn in the shadiest bed you have. It forms a low rosette through winter and by February produces round leaves with the stem growing through the center, one of the most singular looking salad ingredients in any garden. Sow it once and it finds its own dark corners forever afterward. Think of it as the vegetable that kept the gold rush alive, now available in the corner beside your fence. Some plants earn their place, not through beauty, but through usefulness. At the exact moment, usefulness was everything. Number 16, sorrel, Rumex acetosa. The Cistercian monks at the Abbey of Citeaux in Burgundy, founded in 1098, grew this in the shadiest beds of the cloister garden. Not for aesthetics, it was the first green thing harvestable after winter, and it grew where nothing else would. Sorrel appears in the Capitulare de Villis, Charlemagne's estate decree of 795, listed among the plants required across every royal garden in the Frankish Empire. The monks kept it through the 12th and 13th centuries specifically because it thrived along the north wall of the cloister, where other crops refused to establish. The flavor hits like a whole lemon in a salad. Not a squeeze, a whole lemon. That same sharp oxalic acid wilts to a bright green sauce in 90 seconds. The classical base for sorrel soup and the sauce that belongs with salmon in every serious French kitchen. I have a clump of broad-leaved sorrel along the north wall of my raised bed. 5 years. Divided twice, given pieces to 3 people, never replaced. Think of it as the vegetable Charlemagne ordered planted in every royal garden, now available for the corner your yard forgot. The most useful plants in a garden are usually the ones that were already working before we thought to look at them. Number 15, arugula, Aruca vesicaria. The seed packet says full sun. The Romans said shade. Columella, writing in the 1st century in his agricultural manual De Re Rustica, recommended sowing arugula in sheltered, partially shaded plots because full summer heat accelerated bolting and destroyed the flavor. The plant had been grown across the Mediterranean since before the 1st century, well known enough that the poet Virgil referenced it as a stimulant food in his verse. Shade does not diminish arugula, it extends it. A September sowing in your shadiest bed gives leaves from October through December. A late winter sowing produces from March to May, the gap between last winter greens and first summer crops, without bolting, without bitterness, without the aggressive heat stress that makes a summer arugula plant useless within a month. The seed packet was written for a different garden than the one most of us have. Think of it as the salad green that performs better in the difficult corner than in the one you were saving for it. The best growing conditions are not always the obvious ones. Sometimes the shade knows something the sun does not. Number 14, Good King Henry, Chenopodium, Bonus henricus, continuously cultivated in English kitchen gardens since the 16th century. Gone from most of them by the 20th, not because it stopped performing, because we stopped knowing what it was. Good King Henry is a true perennial spinach relative, returns to the same spot every spring for decades. The leaves cook like a richer, earthier spinach. The young spring shoots eat like asparagus. The flower buds cook like sprouting broccoli. 3 vegetables, 1 planting, 30 years. The name comes from the German Guter Heinrich, recorded in herbal literature from the 16th century onward, distinguishing it from a toxic cousin called Bad Henry. The English inserted king somewhere along the way, which is exactly the kind of thing English gardeners do. It thrives in partial shade along walls and fences, where it was traditionally planted in northern cottage gardens, precisely because those yards offered little else. Think of it as 3 vegetables in one planting, in the same shaded corner for 30 years. The most generous plants in a garden are usually the ones we forgot to keep growing. Number 13, New Zealand spinach, tetragonioids. Captain James Cook brought this back from his first Pacific voyage in 1770 because his botanist Joseph Banks had watched the Maori eat it. Cook fed it to his crew as a scurvy preventative on the return journey. Banks brought specimens to Kew Gardens, where it was cultivated from 1772 onward. Most gardeners who try it overheat it. New Zealand spinach evolved on the shaded, wind-battered cliffs of the Pacific coast. Direct sun intermittent, salt spray constant. In partial shade, it sprawls magnificently, trailing long stems of thick triangular leaves, harvested by pinching the tips. It does not bolt. It does not turn bitter. It produces from June until the first hard frost. It covers the summer spinach gap, June to September, when true spinach has already given up. That gap is the most frustrating hole in the salad garden. New Zealand spinach fills it entirely. Think of it as the vegetable Captain Cook used to keep his crew alive, now available for the bed under your apple tree. The most dependable vegetables are often the ones that survived a long journey before they reached your garden. Number 12, perpetual spinach, Beta vulgaris varsier cicla. This is not spinach. The name is a 19th century marketing decision. Perpetual spinach is a chard, a stemless, leaf-only chard, and one of the most underused vegetables in the shaded garden. True spinach bolts in heat and sulks in cold. Perpetual spinach does neither. Documented in English kitchen garden manuals from the 1830s, recommended specifically for shaded beds and north-facing borders, where true spinach struggled. It produces dark, crinkled leaves from spring through autumn, withstands moderate frost, and in mild winters, keeps going year-round. Harvest the outer leaves, and the center keeps producing. Cut it back by 2/3 in midsummer, and it regenerates in 3 weeks. One sowing in March in the darkest corner you have, leaves from May until December. I grew a row the year I gave up on true spinach entirely. It gave me more leaves in 8 months than the spinach bed had in 2 years. I have not grown true spinach since. Think of it as the vegetable that does what spinach promises, but never delivers. The most reliable things in a garden are usually the ones nobody bothers to boast about. Number 11, chervil, Anthriscus cerefolium. Roman legionaries carried this dried across northern Europe, not for cooking, for medicine. By the time they left, they had planted it along the shaded edges of garrison gardens, from the Rhine to Hadrian's Wall, and it never entirely left. Pliny the Elder documented it in Naturalis Historia in the 1st century. The garrison at Vindolanda, the Roman fort just south of Hadrian's Wall in Northumberland, grew it in the shaded bed along the north wall. The Vindolanda tablets, the oldest surviving handwritten documents in Britain, recovered in the 1970s, include references to garden herbs among the fort's supplies. In shade, chervil outperforms almost every other culinary herb. It bolts in direct sun. In cool partial shadow, it produces its fine feathery leaves from early spring through late autumn. Flavor between parsley, tarragon, and anise, more delicate than any of them alone. Escoffier used it in every classic French kitchen. Home gardeners forgot about it when parsley became the default. Think of it as the herb Roman legionaries carried into the shade of northern Europe and left behind for good reason. The oldest ingredients in a garden are often the ones with the longest case for staying. Number 10, kale, Brassica oleracea var, sabellica. The fact the kale gospel never mentions. Kale grown in partial shade is more tender, less bitter, and more productive than kale grown in full sun. The reason is biology. Full sun accelerates the production of glucosinolates, the sulfur compounds behind kale's characteristic bitterness. Partial shade slows that process. Leaves stay softer, flavor mellows. The plant puts energy into leaf production rather than defensive chemistry. The Scottish kale-yard, the kitchen garden attached to almost every Scottish cottage from the 14th century onward, was typically a small walled, north-facing enclosure. The kale from those yards fed Scottish families through winters that would have made a Mediterranean gardener weep. Lacinato kale performs best in shade. The long, dark, blistered leaves stay productive from autumn through the following spring, surviving hard frosts and reaching full flavor only after the first serious cold snap. Think of it as the vegetable the Scottish kale yard already knew, and the kale gospel forgot to mention. The most honest vegetables are the ones that perform better when you stop trying to optimize them. Number 9. Lettuce, Lactuca sativa. Every lettuce packet says full sun. In high summer, full sun is a lettuce death sentence. Lettuce bolts in heat. It turns bitter in direct afternoon sun. A south-facing bed in July is a bolt factory. Thomas Jefferson grew 12 varieties of lettuce at Monticello, documented in his garden journal from 1774 to 1824. The beds along the shadier north-facing slope were his most productive lettuce rows through June and July. He noted explicitly that the shadier beds gave him weeks of additional harvest before bolting. Loose-leaf varieties, oak leaf, Lala Rosso, red sails, are the most shade tolerant. In a bed that gets 3 to 4 hours of morning light and shade from noon onward, summer lettuce produces for 6 to 8 weeks before bolting, twice the window of a full sun bed. Think of it as the salad crop Thomas Jefferson already knew to plant in the shade. The simplest improvements in a garden are usually the ones the instructions told us not to make. Number 8. Swiss chard, Beta vulgaris subiespecie schicla. Swiss chard is not Swiss. The name was coined by the Swiss botanist Cope in 1826 to distinguish it from French varieties in his botanical taxonomy. It has been grown in Mediterranean kitchen gardens since ancient Greece. The confusion has lasted 2 centuries, and counting. What matters is this. In partial shade, 3 to 4 hours of direct light, chard does something remarkable. The stems intensify in color. Rainbow varieties develop deeper reds, more saturated yellows, brighter whites than the same plants in full sun. Shade reduces stress and lets the plant direct energy into pigment rather than sun protection. I grew rainbow chard along the east fence. Full sun until 11, shade the rest of the day. By August, the stems were the most vividly colored thing in the garden, more striking than any flower I had planted that year. Harvest outer stems. Inner growth replaces them within 2 weeks. 1 April, sowing in shade. June through November. Think of it as the vegetable that gets more beautiful the darker the corner gets. Some things reveal their full color, not in the brightest light, but in the most sheltered place. Number 7. Mustard greens, Brassica juncea. Shade does not weaken mustard greens. It makes them edible. In full sun, direct heat accelerates the pungent oils that make mature mustard greens too aggressive for most uses. Partial shade slows the process. Leaves stay milder, broader, more tender for weeks longer than sun-grown plants. More leaves for longer that more people will actually eat. Mustard has been cultivated in Indian kitchen gardens for over 5,000 years. The Rig Veda, compiled between 1500 and 1200 before Christ, contains references to mustard cultivation. It spread through Persia into Mediterranean gardens, then east through China, becoming foundational in cuisines across 3 continents. Every culture that adopted it grew it in the conditions they had, which often meant partial shade in walled urban gardens. The red and purple varieties, Red Giant, Osaka Purple, are the most shade tolerant, so late summer for an autumn harvest that pushes through the first frost. Think of it as the vegetable 5,000 years of kitchen gardening already knew. And the seed packet forgot to mention. The most useful information in a garden is usually the information that contradicts the label. Number 6. Mizuna, Brassica rapavar, Nipposinica. Kyoto market gardeners have grown this in the shaded beds along the Kamo River since at least the 17th century. Mizuna means water greens, a reference to the irrigation channels running through the market gardens of the Nishiki district. Not a fashionable plant, a working vegetable for people growing food in difficult urban conditions, in beds that caught partial light between buildings and walls. Deeply serrated leaves, mild peppery flavor, stays tender in shade long after it would have toughened in sun. Survives down to -5 Celsius without protection. In a shaded bed, it produces from September through February in mild winters. So late summer in the shadiest, dampest corner you have. Harvest with scissors at 4 inches. Regrown within 10 days. Repeat until January. I have grown it in the shadow of the north fence for 4 years running. The first year, I was skeptical. The last 3 years, I have sown 2 rows instead of 1. Think of it as the vegetable Kyoto market gardeners grew in the shade of the river walls, and the Western gardening world forgot to import with it. The The most productive corners of a garden are often the ones we convinced ourselves were too dark to bother with. If this list is changing how you think about your shaded beds, hit subscribe and the bell. Number 1 is a true perennial that has grown in the darkest corners of English cottage gardens for centuries, and we are nearly there. Number 5, climbing beans, Phaseolus vulgaris. Most gardening advice says beans need full sun. That advice was written for people with full sun. Climbing beans in partial shade, 3 to 4 hours of direct light, extend the productive season by 3 to 4 weeks, compared to full sun plants. Beans set pods poorly in heat above 27 degrees Celsius. A shaded bed stays cooler. The plants keep setting pods through August and into September, when full sun beans have already stopped. Less at the peak, more over time. The Cherokee people of the southern Appalachians grew pole beans in the dappled shade of forest clearings long before European contact. The Cherokee Trail of Tears bean, carried during the forced removal of the Cherokee Nation from Georgia to Oklahoma in 1838 and 39, is one of the most shade-tolerant climbing varieties in cultivation today, preserved through one of the most catastrophic events in American history. Still available from heritage seed suppliers. Plant it at the base of a north-facing fence. Give it something to climb. Step back. Think of it as the bean that survived a forced march and still feeds people in the shade. The most resilient vegetables in a garden carry histories we are only beginning to understand. Number 4, peas. Pisum sativum. Peas are not a sun crop. They are a cloud crop. They evolved in the cool, overcast highlands of Central Asia, the mountain regions of present-day Turkey and Iran. Domesticated in the Neolithic period, with archaeological evidence of cultivation at Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, dating to 7000 before Christ. They grew under the kind of filtered light that a shaded corner of your garden approximates from April through June. In partial shade, peas sown in March produce a reliable harvest in May and June before the heat arrives. They last 2 to 3 weeks longer than peas in full sun before heat stress stops pod production. The flavor runs marginally sweeter, cool conditions slowing the conversion of sugars to starch that starts the moment a pea is picked. Mange 2 and sugar snap varieties are the most shade tolerant. Alderman, grown in English kitchen gardens since the 1880s, does particularly well against north-facing fences. Think of it as the crop 7,000 years of cloud climate agriculture understood, and the spring sunshine campaign undid. The oldest crops are often the ones that knew how to grow before we gave them instructions. Number 3, spinach. Spinacia oleracea. The spinach myth, it needs sun, warmth, and a spring sowing. Every part of that is wrong. Spinach was domesticated in ancient Persia, present-day Iran, around 2,000 years ago, in cool springs, mild autumns, and the filtered light of mountain passes and walled courtyard gardens. Arab agronomists called it the Prince of Vegetables by the 7th century. It entered Europe through the cookbook of the Andalusian physician Ibn Razin al-Tujibi, who wrote Reliefs of Sorrows and Provisions for Travel and Company in the 13th century, one of the most consequential food documents in European history. It bolts in heat and full summer sun within weeks. In a shaded bed, it produces from September through November, and again from February through April, the 2 windows when almost nothing else is worth eating, without bolting, without bitterness. Sow in late August in your darkest bed. Harvest through October. It will survive most winters and return with the first mild spell in February. Think of it as the Prince of Vegetables, grown in the shade where it always belonged. The most misunderstood crops are usually the ones that grew perfectly well before we gave them the wrong instructions. Number 2, kohlrabi, Brassica oleracea var. Gongilodes. Looks like a spaceship, tastes like a sweeter, milder turnip. Grows in your shadiest bed with a productivity that embarrasses its more glamorous relatives. Kohlrabi was developed by Flemish and German gardeners in the 16th century. The first formal description appears in the Herbal of the Swiss botanist Conrad Gessner in 1564. A working vegetable, bred for yield and resilience in the walled kitchen gardens of northern European cities, where south-facing beds were scarce and north-facing beds were what most urban gardeners had. In partial shade, the bulb swells more slowly and evenly than in full sun, staying at the ideal eating stage. Crisp, mild, tender, for 3 to 4 weeks instead of the 10 days a sun-grown plant gives you before it turns woody. The shade extends the harvest window. The thing that sounds like a disadvantage is the advantage. Purple varieties, colibri, bluesta, hold their color best in partial shade. Sow from April through July. Think of it as the spaceship vegetable that grows better in the shade than the catalogs will ever tell you. The most underrated vegetables are the ones that never needed better conditions. Just a gardener willing to try the dark corner. Number 1. Welsh onion, Allium fistulosum. This is the vegetable that has been growing in the dark corners of cottage gardens in Wales and the west of England since before the Enclosure Acts changed what a garden was for. Before the Victorian kitchen garden made growing food an aesthetic statement. Before the seed catalog made annuals the default. The Welsh onion is not Welsh. The name comes from the Old English word walshe, meaning foreign, used for anything that arrived from elsewhere. The plant came from Siberia and China, cultivated for over 2,000 years. It appears in Chinese agricultural texts from the Han Dynasty, documented between 206 before Christ and 220 after. A true perennial, not an annual, not a biennial. The same clump in the same dark corner for decades. It divides itself each season. Pull leaves from the outside, hollow, mild, green onion flavor, and the center keeps growing. No replanting, no replacement. I planted a clump along the north wall of my raised bed in 2018. Divided it twice, never replaced it. Every February, before anything else is growing, it is the first thing I cut. Think of it as the perennial that works the shadiest corner of your yard for a decade and never asks to be replaced. The best vegetables in a garden are not the ones that perform in perfect conditions. They are the ones that show up every year in the difficult corner and get on with it. Stop for a second. 20 vegetables, 20 different plants, 20 different histories, 20 different shaded corners across 2,000 years of growing food. One pattern. Step 1. A gardener has a dark corner, a north-facing strip, a bed under the tree, the slot beside the fence. Step 2. The garden center tells them, by omission if not directly, that this corner cannot feed them. The annual and the sun lover are what fill the display tables in spring. Step 3. The corner stays empty or fills with disappointment. Step 4. The gardener buys more the wrong thing. The garden center sells more the wrong thing. That is not 20 separate stories. That is one story told 20 times. Every vegetable on this list knew how to grow in the dark before the seed catalog decided sun was the standard. 20 vegetables. Everyone thriving in the corner you were told to give up on. Tomorrow morning, walk to the darkest part of your yard. The strip beside the garage, the bed under the fence, the slot that gets 3 hours of light on a good day. That corner will grow Welsh onion and perpetual spinach, chervil and mizuna, claytonia and mitsuba, landcress in January, when the rest of the garden is frozen solid, sorrel every spring without being asked, kale more tender and less bitter than anything you grew in full sun last year. You were told that corner was useless. It was never useless. It was just waiting for the right plants. Tell me in the comments which corner you are starting with, and which vegetable surprised you most. I will be reading every single one. If someone you know is standing in a garden center right now, being told their shaded yard cannot grow food, send this to them. The system is not broken. It is working exactly the way it was built to work. You were never supposed to find out that the dark corner had been feeding people for 2,000 years. The best gardens are not the ones with the most sun. They are the ones where someone finally asked what the shade could do. Stay sharp, read those labels, keep growing.